Happy Sunday to all of you humanists out there. Thanks for joining us at Being Human Church. So today, we're going to continue our conversation from last week a little bit, where we talked about chaos and complexity. So real quick recap, chaos is basically the forces that look to take apart meaning and the complexity that we've created as human beings and as a human species. Whereas complexity is the representation of all the effort, the energy, and the meaning we've put into human systems up until this point. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about mixing those concepts with the idea of the infinite game. And the infinite game, as it relates to humanism, is that the goal for humans is to stay alive and keep humanity going as long as we possibly can. So that's that infinite game. Because if we ever stop playing the game of being alive as a species, then all of the meaning and all the complexity we've created up to this point is no more. So have you ever felt like things that we do on a daily basis are really just like exercises in futility? Have you ever felt like the chores, the cleaning, the yard work, laundry, and even things like voting and whatever else aren't really that meaningful? Have you ever felt like we're kind of just doing things over and over again, but we're not really building towards something concrete, right? You're not seeing a product come out of it. Well, the question I would ask is that, are we potentially just looking at this in the wrong way? And we talked about this a little bit last week, where part of the challenge with building complexity is maintaining it. And the thing is, in the concept of physics, right, chaos is really just entropy, right? It's the natural desire of a state to be a randomly disordered chaos. And it takes energy to build a system that has structure to it, that has complexity, that's more ordered. And so one of the challenges that we face is that we have to continue to maintain the complexity that we built. We have to continue to maintain the systems that we built. And so sometimes that means that the little, what seems to be meaningless tasks of maintenance, continuing to clean things, continuing to rake the yard, continuing to tend the garden, or whatever it happens to be, those are the tasks on a daily basis that we humans have to do to maintain the systems of complexity that make our lives meaningful. And so I would ask you to think about what chores you do on a daily basis. What are the things that you do that feels like, man, I'm just doing the same stuff every day, and I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere doing it. But what does that do to help you to sustain what you already have? Whether that's your family, right? Raising kids is a really, really difficult chore, and it's something that's thankless, and it feels like, man, am I even winning at helping kids to become good people? And you never really know, to be honest, in the long run, until your kids are grown and hopefully, productive members of society. But you have to continue to do that maintenance, even if you really don't want to. And so when you think about it in terms of complexity, raising kids and all of the chores that come along with that, the cleaning and the whatever else, all build toward helping our kids, the next generation, be just a little bit farther ahead than we were, right? And so we have invested in them everything that we've learned up to this point, plus a little bit more. Hopefully we've learned something that we do a little bit differently than our parents, in a way that's a little bit more constructive for them. It puts them a little bit farther ahead as the next generation of our species. And just even think about things like raking leaves. And so this is what caused this thought to come to me for the session in the service this week, is I was raking leaves outside. And it seems like an exercise in futility, particularly in the fall. All the leaves are falling down. And every weekend I spend a couple hours raking. Now, fortunately, I like it. So that's something that's helpful. I have a passion for it. And so between my wife and I, right, we differentiate tasks and we assign ourselves based on things we're passionate about or we have the energy to do. But at the same time, it still feels like a little bit of an exercise in futility. But then I thought about it, it's really just one battle in the ongoing war against chaos and against entropy, right? Now we could let the leaves go there and they'll end up, killing the yard, or if you have a garden, they would end up smothering it. And so some of what we do is to maintain the complexity and the order that we've built. And while we could let it go, right? We could let it go back to a wild state. Part of the thing about humans is that we've created this complexity to allow us to progress. We've created technologies that are far beyond the natural state that allow us to create meaning. They've allowed us to evolve as a species into a place where we have enough excess energy, focus, attention, and time to build more and more meaning. And then the hope is, in the long run, that we've built this excess capacity into something that helps our species survive and thrive. It helps us get past catastrophes that we would not be able to had we not built this. And so while these small things like cleaning and yard work and raising kids and even voting seem meaningless in the short term, think of them as a constant or a part of the constant fight against chaos and the constant fight against entropy. So there are a couple other things that I think it is that we need to consider in this long-term fight, this infinite game. And one of those things is voting, right? We've got voting coming up for most of us, I think, on next Tuesday. This is something that, granted, in today's politics, it might seem like it doesn't really mean anything. And I would argue that the opposite is true. It actually is extremely meaningful. It is the culmination of the meaning that we put into our system of governance, and that's the thing that allows us to operate together as a species. And so, while depending on what, regardless of what party you're in, a lot of the voting that I think we've become frustrated with is because we don't do enough of it, right? Our voting rates at the very highest has been in the mid to high 60% of eligible voters actually going to vote. What if it were more than that? What if we took a little bit of our energy and put it into getting everyone around us to vote, to the point where our government was more representative, or we even changed the way that we vote so that it is itself more meaningful and more representative? I think this is one of those things that we really have to look at, not as an inconvenient thing that we have to do infrequently, but as something that's central. It's a central battle to our ongoing war against chaos and entropy. And I think that's especially true in recent years, as we've seen a lot of the systems that we built, especially the customs that we've built for tolerance, start to break down, right? We've allowed our systems, our complex systems of customs, to break down because we haven't put in the maintenance. We haven't put in the day-to-day effort. We haven't forced ourselves to have the difficult conversations with people who we disagree with. And so those systems have decayed over time. It's the same thing as maintaining a machine. If we don't oil it, if we don't give it the attention, the love and care that it needs, it will eventually break down. And that's what I think has happened in this case. And so the other thing I would say is the going to church, right? A lot of us who put ourselves in the quote unquote nuns category, the people who don't go to a traditional church, a traditional religion, I think we have to look at this as an investment in ourselves, investment in our community, and especially our community apart from that of traditional religion. And I think a lot of us feel alone and isolated because we don't put in this effort, we don't put in this work to try and build a community that is unique to us, that we really want to invest in. And so I would ask that you consider those two things in particular, voting and going to church, whatever that happens to mean for you, building community, going to do activities, volunteering, being involved in building something. To me, that's what I'm really talking about when I'm saying going to church. I ask you to look at those two things as something that are part of your fight against chaos and against entropy, and part of your infinite game to keep the human species going. And then, of course, the raising children thing again. It really takes a village. And this is hard because we have broken down our way of raising children into our little nuclear families and the ideas that we can do it alone. And that's just such a falsehood. Having been now in the military for a long time and moving from place to place, you learn very quickly that you have to build a new family everywhere you go because you cannot do it by yourself. We humans have not evolved enough to be able to raise children on our own. And so that's another thing that we have to, one, be invested in, but two, be invested in enough to go find the village to help us raise our children. And so for this week, I ask you to think about how we're constantly combating the void that would overtake humanity if we stop doing the maintenance, if we stop doing the little things. Think about what little tasks that you do on a weekly basis that help you to maintain your complexity, maintain your systems, your family, your community, your government, and reinforce that to yourself. Look at it from the perspective of, hey, it's not that this is an exercise in futility. It's that the infinite game requires infinite patience. It requires infinite engagement. And while that doesn't have to be you every moment of every single day, it does have to be us as humans, as a species, constantly engaged, constantly working together to build a better future, to maintain the complex systems so that we humans can survive and thrive. So thank you all for joining this week. I appreciate you coming to listen and to engage, to build that community, to invest in yourselves. And I hope to see you again in the near future as we continue this journey together.